Continuous improvement comes in lots of different flavors and styles. I'm Bella Engelbach, and I'm inviting you to journey with me to the edges of lean. Episode 130, Continuously Reducing Racism in Your Company Culture with J.D. Maas. A diverse organization is a competitive advantage. Innovation and problem solving thrive when people from diverse backgrounds work together. No matter who we are, when we move into that diverse environment, we all, no matter our race, carry baggage from the racism in our culture. J.D. Maas has written a book called Race for What?, addressing the causes of racism and steps white folk can take to heal from the harm of racism and begin to connect as humans. He joined me at the Edges of Lean to share his insights. J.D. Maas, welcome to the Edges of Lean.
Well, thank you, Bella. I'm excited to be here with you.
Oh, I'm glad to have you. Hey, JD, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name is J.D. Maas, author of Race for What? It is my purpose work. My parents in the 70s and 80s raised myself and my sisters purposely and intentionally in and around Black community with the intention to learn not to be racist at a time when systems are set up for us to inherently be racist just based on, segregation and not really understanding other cultures and feeling like, we're the best. And so my parents wanted to teach me about systems, and they both were kind of fighting their systems in their own way. And that led an inner charge in me. And so through my journey, having quite a few or most of my friends being Black, I learned and experienced racism, and it always made me want to understand the why behind it. Like what led cops to stop us randomly, what led people to be uncomfortable when I brought my Black friends into the country clubs, what, made my grandparents uncomfortable with the number of friends that I had that were African American. So I just wanted to get an understanding of why. Why would we start a culture that was so harmful, and why would we not want to heal it? And that's been part of my journey. My book consists of stories of my journey as well as 7 steps to healing the harms of our culture. So,
wow. So were your parents activists? How did they come about to say, this is the thing we want to do, where we want to raise our family?
My father was somewhat of an activist in college, wanting to just, fight for equality. He got into law. He's done civil cases. He actually, we talk about it. He did police murders and going after the police civilly.
As a lawyer.
Yeah, as an attorney, well before there was cameras and he had a chance to even, win those types of cases. But he's taken on the little guy and, taken on the system. So from a lawyer's perspective, yes, somewhat. I don't know the why, though. Even he kind of didn't have the why. For my mother, her and her sisters and brothers had a very close relationship with their housekeeper. It's almost like the lady in Help that really felt that activism because of the relationship she had with them. And her twin brother, was killed in a car accident at 15. And she witnessed her father feeling heartbroken that the help, so to speak, was coming in the back door, and felt the loss of his son more than the people coming in the front door. And from that moment, you never have to come in the back door again. And my mother actually wrote about it in a school essay. And so I think that was a powerful moment. She fought the system of healthcare. She's an internist medical doctor, and she fought the HMO system from the beginning. And so I know from their work standpoint, yes, they have this activism, but also this care for us to have an experience they didn't have.
That really is remarkable. I'm sure you know that. That's very unusual. JD, what do you do now today? So you wrote this book. What are you doing as related to the book or otherwise?
So I'm really targeting working with college age students, and right now it's been a little difficult. Colleges are very scared of this topic at the moment, but I think that will change again. Like I had one college professor wanted to bring me in because he loved the further steps of healing, but wanted me to stay away from diagnosing the issue of racism and whatnot. And but I really think that age, as far as changing culture, I remember being that age. I wanted to be different as an adult. This is the age where you're deciding how do you want to present yourself to the world as an adult and versus as how you've lived as a child. And I think that time in your life gives you the greatest opportunity for me to be heard and for us to try and start something different and impactful.
Yeah. And because I ask everyone at the end of the show about, their one piece of advice for young people. It's really exciting to me to, talk about people that age, because there is so much opportunity in front of them, right? And it is a time of life where you stepping away from your family, you have that opportunity to think new things, try on new ways of being that might not have gone over back at home. I know one of the things that happened when my kids went to college, that first Thanksgiving or Christmas they came home, they were so different. I mean, just like even that first 3 months, what happens to them, the maturity, the exposure to different kinds of thinking is just remarkable. So it's a fantastic age to be doing that. I think you're spot on with that. So JD, when you talk about culture, can you define for us what culture is, or how you define culture?
I define culture as behavioral practices and interactions as a group, and how those develop and manifest in over time and become kind of norms, right? And so it's one of the hardest things to change, is because most of us get used to behaving a certain way or knowing how the behavior of a system sort of works without understanding the why behind it. And so it becomes such a subconscious behavior that we don't even in changing, it's almost like we tend to change our shirts, but not our actual behaviors and whatnot.
Well, like you say, put on different t-shirts. Says I'm being anti-racist today, but you haven't examined where all that's coming from.
Right.
Can we dive a little bit into that then, in terms of we in Lean and Continuous Improvement, we are all about root cause, like why things happen. Because once you understand the why, then you can start to put countermeasures in place to try to change things.
Yeah.
So. And I presume you're talking mostly about the United States, North America, in what you're talking about. What are some of the whys for racism in our culture?
So I'm talking even further back if you look at Europe and where it's located, whether you believe or understand that people came from the Central African parts and expanded across the globe and going into these places that didn't have as much sunlight and they lost a level of melanin in their skin, or whether you believe that they maybe were born with less melanin because someone darker could have a lighter child. And to be safer, they moved up into these regions. Whatever it is, hundreds of years ago, people of less melanin really occupied this northern region we call Europe and whatnot. And in that region, there is a scarcity of resources in comparison to some of the warmer climates, right? Where there's less sun, there's less natural resources, and we get our resources for our body, our essential minerals and elements that we need from the earth. And so if we don't have that in that, right, if you and I think this is the last of the water that we have, Bella.
And for those of you who are listening, he's holding up a glass of water. It's a pretty full glass, but it's probably not enough for both of us, right?
Right. So every sip that I take, it starts to naturally go from your standpoint, like, hey, wait a second, you're taking all the water. What about me? And instead of us really sharing as much in a scarcity mentality, we have a an idea of competitiveness, right? I define racism as Dr. Claude Anderson defined it. It is a desire to control resources. If you feel like there's a scarcity, which our economic systems are built on, then we naturally also build our economy based on that. Everybody in your industry, everybody in your kind of group or area is a competitor to you. And so instead of seeing us all as human and part of this great human race, we see each other as competitors. And so you get this racism starting. And you got competition, you have a disconnection to the planet. If it's not providing you all of the resources that you need, you might not love it as much. You have, so harming it to get your own needs may not be the greatest priority of yours. And health-wise, we weren't as healthy, right? We, part of our colonial efforts and in our dominating other cultures was we brought disease with us where we went. And so these things have manifested in our culture today. If you look at the United States, especially where this has manifested to the greatest level, mental health, emotional health, physical health is of great concern here. Climate issues of how we treat the planet and whatnot is of great concern here. And how we treat other cultures is of great concern here. And so,
and then, yeah, and if I could just interrupt, I'm just thinking about, the environment that a lot of us work in, which is, some level of a corporation or a company. Then what you're saying translates into those organizations as well. So there's the idea of scarcity of resources. Some people are going to get paid a lot, other people are not paid as much.
right,
We have to, and then, we have to conserve the resources that we do. We don't necessarily, we don't share office space.
right,
When people are forced to share office space, it's horrible. They don't like, people don't like
right.
that.
And so much of it is pitted against each other, right? We see, the other corporation as our enemy. We see each other trying to fight for jobs as our enemy. So much is built on a scarcity mentality. Whereas if you look at African cultures and other indigenous cultures that are more connected to the earth, more sharing of resources, they have the village to raise a child. We're all in this together. Your children are my children. We're sharing resources because there's more than enough, right? See, so here I'm holding up the glass again to the listeners. We don't know that behind this wall, there's just running water nonstop. But all we can see is this is what we have, right? This is before we had cell phones and internets and cars and planes and trains and whatnot. So I think that's where the why started, right? Naturally being in a scarce place. And what happens is, I don't know if you've ever recognized this in yourself, but you're used to something happening a certain way in your area. And when you go meet somebody and they offer something kind of that triggers you, even though we were offered by the Indians the spices to share, even though we were offered by, allowed, and welcomed into the African nations to share in the resources, we wanted to grab it and take it because we still brought that sort of scarcity mentality. And so that's where I believe the racism really is enrooted in.
Yeah, particularly in North America, and I think in Australia too, some other places, there's really, really a sense of, what turned into the concept of manifest destiny is that, all right, here's all this abundance here. Now this belongs to us.
Right.
And so the people came in, and even if you weren't sure if the native people there were actually people, you were pretty sure that all the trees and the forests and the mountains and the lakes, they were really there for the people, for the settlers to come in, and take. And it was a very sure, deep belief. It wasn't,
right.
It was which came from some other sort of imperialistic tendencies.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you're working with these young people, JD, how many are they recognizing this? Do they feel this? There's a lot of people coming in with anxiety or concerns about this already.
So now more of them have anxiety and concerns about where we are in this world right now. No, I think it's been more eye-opening. I've gotten great responses from, hey, this person presented this topic in a way that made me think very differently. I had one response of a young Black woman that in a class full of mostly white women in occupational therapy that said, I grew up around white folks, and I just thank you for explaining it that way, because when I go into a room of my fellow Black family members, community, and we see each other succeeding, we're very happy for each other. When I would go into friends and school events and things of that nature, I felt this level of comparison and competition at a much greater level than I didn't understand why. Like, why can't you just be happy? Like, you guys are doing so well. And there was never kind of enough. And that really helped open her eyes to that, which was good. Part of how I'm hoping that us with less melanin in our skin can heal is the fact that we can hear it from other cultures. Because we've been kept away, our school systems don't teach us about other cultures, especially in the United States, but we're taught to, think that we're the greatest, respect the flag, pledge your allegiance, all of these things about feeling great. And yet we're hidden, and it creates a level of ignorance. Arrogance and ignorance is a hard thing to kind of change. But the students seem to be much more open to hearing that.
That's really interesting. So thinking about this again from a kind of a lean perspective. Now, one of the things that we really want to do when we're implementing a lean transformation, trying to do that change, is to increase the level of collaboration. But what you're talking about, as you could say, people with less melanin in their skin, is there is that innate sense of competitiveness that it's hard to collaborate when you feel like you have to compete with other people. And systems actually create competition, right? So the way that we evaluate people, the way that people get, the annual review, the way people get promoted, all under the surface of what we're doing, trying to get people to collaborate, it's actually competitive. We can't all get, the way it's set up, we don't all get the big raise. Not everybody's going to get the promotion. Some people are going to be, I think we've gotten past the Jack Welch thing of, getting rid of the bottom 10% every year, but we've certainly, we create these competitive strata in organizations. Then we come in as, wanting to do culture change and say people, but you all need to collaborate. You need to figure out a way to share the work. You need to help each other. When somebody has a problem, you need to jump in and help that person with their problem. And sometimes the question that we get asked is, well, how will I get credit for that? Right. So how do you address those types of situations? Where do you start with that, JD?
So starting with the why, my steps, 7 steps that are in my book. Step 1 is don't take a step. Seek some understanding and recognize that we've been purposely raised in this system of competition and in these ways that we only think of as part of the human culture because we haven't learned about other parts of human culture as well. So 1, take a step back and seek some understanding. 2 is to really start to recognize the harm. But 3 is where you're talking about, is starting to let go, right? We have to really and that's the most challenging.
That is challenge
is to be able to let go. And if I let go and you're competing, you're going to grab the reins and you're going to go forward. So how we do that is to need to see and appreciate something else, something greater, right? And we need to have that level of understanding of what that might be. What is greater if we collaborate? 1, we'd have a lot more peace and less stress in our life if we were thinking of each other as allies and not as competitors, right? And 2, if we recognize there was more than enough resources for us all to share and have a decent life, then we would also lower our level of stress and possibly even enjoy our life. But letting go also allows us to learn more. It gives us more opening to do it. There's a commercial, I want to say it's in banking or in insurance, and it was all about, well, if you let go, then you can experience this. And that's part of the reality.
I was actually thinking, I was thinking about my dog. People listen to the show know, I think about my dogs a lot. So I have a dog that sometimes brings home things I don't want her to bring home, but I can try to grab it from her. and she won't let me.
Right.
But if I trade her for something better, then she can
Right.
let go of that
Yeah. Right.
thing and take the treat. So she can't get the treat until she lets
Right.
go. So we need to be at least as smart as the dog and let go so we can start to see the other things. I think kind of going back then to your first step of like really not taking a step and developing some understanding, then does that help you then with the third step because
Yes.
you
I,
start to see what the possibilities might
right.
be?
So I believe so. And I went through this journey, right? Even though I grew up with, most of my friends being Black and I got to hear stories and see cultural differences. It wasn't until I went to Israel after working in the entertainment business for a while, and I saw a community that was at a level of peace I had not seen. And these were African Americans that left here in the 60s during the civil rights era, went through Africa and then went into Israel and settled there. And they were completely vegan. They were all about peace and health and sharing and kind of just living according to spiritual guidance and whatnot. And I saw what the amount of intention that went into that and the amount of peace that came out of that. And even when I first got involved, I came in the way we often do with, I got an answer, I got a solution, I got to sit back, arrogant little white man, and chill out and let us show you. And yes, it was very difficult to relearn that, but it took learning from a new mind. And that's step 6.
So wait, we're on step 3.
Right.
Let's do
So
step 4 first.
learning the understanding that this is different and I never was taught this, right? When we first got there, my grandmother was actually with me and we were being taken around this village and I had to use the restroom and he said, just go in any door and use the restroom. Well, these were people's homes and I was, yeah, I'm not going to do that. So we kept walking and he told me, hey, go inside the door and use the restroom. So I went to knock and he said, I didn't say knock. Open the door. We don't lock our doors and use the restroom. And I put
Wow.
my head in and I hear this woman's voice, hey, baby, what you need? Some water, some food, the restroom? And I'm like, the restroom, I'll take some water. It was hot that day. And I go to the restroom. I come back out, take the water, and I'm on my walk. And so we keep going. And this 2-year-old comes running around the corner and he goes, hey, are you going to the park? And my grandmother and I are looking around. We don't see any other adults. And the 2-year-old just keeps running. And we are like, wait a second. And he said, don't worry, there's more eyes on her than you know. And we raise them as soon as they're old enough to walk to explore the entire village as their home. And that level of peace, and every time I tell the story, I get goosebumps.
Oh,
But
wow.
that
Yeah.
level of peace was so unseen for me and such a desirable thing that it made me want to join, and at the same time still not recognize I didn't even think it through of the level of intention it went to creating something like that versus just going, I want to join, right? And so I got family that are moving to Costa Rica and I warn them, don't bring you want to go to Costa Rica because you see this level of peace and you're not, and but don't bring your American ways. Go learn, how do I get to be this peaceful? So
Wow. Well, and I'm just thinking again, thinking about like life in the typical, North American European corporation. One of the things I remember having a conversation with somebody about was about that they would benefit from going. I worked in a pharmaceutical company. They would benefit from going to visit somebody else's lab, and they said to me, "Oh, but I'm not allowed to go there." And I said, "Who said you're not allowed to go there?" They said, "Well, we're just not supposed to visit each other's labs." I was like, well, where did that come from?
right,
I mean, obviously there are some labs where they're doing dangerous things and you can't just walk in, right? You need
right,
to be dressed properly or you need to be escorted so you don't disturb an experiment. But that idea that, okay, here's a wall,
right,
I'm not allowed to go in here, or I'm not allowed to go in the executive suite.
right,
That there's a receptionist at the entrance who will guard the entrance and make sure that the riffraff doesn't get in
yeah,
there. And you're talking about something, but that requires that, like you said, attention, right? So to be the woman who says, come on in, what can I get you? There must have been for her some relearning to do to be
Right.
able to live comfortably with that open door.
So,
You know.
so the first 300 people that left the United States, they purposely went to Africa and just tried to live off of the land, to shed themselves of having a 7-Eleven at the corner or a store or whatever it is, kind of, and really get back to an understanding of being connected to the earth. And so, yeah, you have to shed that, right? That's part of the process, is going through that. And if you don't see that that is going to be beneficial, I ask people all the time, when you look outside, we're so trained to see the roads and the cars and the buildings, and there's so much life around us, especially here in the Midwest. There's greenery coming up. We get angry that the greenery is coming through the cracks of our sidewalks, but that's life, right? We have created this imitation of life on top of it. And so just getting back to being connected and appreciating life, it can slow us down. It can really help us to understand the benefits of collaboration and cooperation.
Okay, so JD, we 3 steps. I'm not sure you told us what the 4th step is.
The 4th step is to appreciate other cultures, right? Appreciate the value of other cultures, right? And so I say this as a term both in an emotional standpoint, but also we use these same terms in financial standpoints. Appreciating value. You buy a home, you want the value to appreciate, right? And we've assigned values to these things. You're working on your job, you want to be appreciated. That appreciation is going to lead you to a raise, these, that, and the other. If we can start to appreciate other cultures, and specifically in this case, I would say to Black culture, to even acknowledge that they have endured so much, and yet it's not in them to want revenge on a mass level. Maybe for an act or two, you might find somebody in an interaction that wants revenge, but you've never seen bombing of a city, Black Wall Street. They didn't come back and say, well, we need to go bomb, another city. That they don't want that. They want us to let them be and let them grow and let them show us a different way of loving. And so if we can learn to appreciate that other cultures exist and some of their practices, then repairing the harm of our culture, which is step 5, becomes a value to us as well, right? Because now we value them greater instead of trying to compete and suppress. And in competition, it's not always about thriving to be our best. I know we've made that part of our mantra that, capitalism and these things make us strive to be our best. Often they don't. Often they make us strive to cheat and steal and suppress and destroy, and right, because that's still winning. I've beat you if I'm better than you. And you kind of mentioned this, and I'm skipping ahead on your question, but this is what I tell students and young people. Don't get caught up in the competition so much that you're worried about positioning instead of just being the best person and human that you can be, right? And start to practice those things, because we get to trying to position ourselves and strategize, and we're just missing so much of what life has to offer. If I'm trying to position myself over you right now, Bella, because I have a podcast and I want to be better than you, I'm going to come in here. I could easily try and sabotage this instead of experiencing this wonderful experience that you and I are sharing right in this conversation. So it's that kind of breaking away, that if we value those things, then the healing and the humanity behind the healing we'll also value as well.
And again, I'm thinking about, how does this apply to people who are practicing lean and continuous improvement? We talk about, culture change all the time, and it's, it's a very deep topic. There's a lot we can talk about with that culture change, but that's really interesting to me to hear what you're saying about like appreciating other cultures. And I know that you're talking about, appreciating, Black culture,
indigenous
culture, or whatever it may be. But coming into an organization and wanting to change the culture in the organization, what a difference it would make to start by appreciating the culture that's already there. Maybe it's not, delivering what the company needs right now, but appreciate what's already there. How is it working? What are the connections? Where are the things where things really are growing? I think that's a marvelous idea, and I hadn't really considered that in my own work, JD. So thank you for that. I really want to think that through
Sure.
more. So
And
yeah.
and you can saying one part of this is not working does not mean that every part of it isn't working. And saying one part is working doesn't mean it's all working. So getting that appreciation gives you something to build on to say, okay, there's still this here, right? Just because, if you put some harmful things in this, or
It's a glass of water, by the way.
I would say, you can still get nutrition out of a meal that gives you food poisoning. Not every part of the meal gave you food poisoning, but the fact that there was food poisoning in the meal makes it something that we should change, right?
Right.
Figure out what part of that needs to change and focus on that. And so step 6 is the new mind. And that's kind of the concept of what I had to learn, even though I saw this and I wanted to be a part of it. If I didn't help create it and I could only bring the culture that I had to it, instead of saying, okay, I want to learn how to develop this type of culture. What do I need to do? Why don't I, instead of leading the way, and that's one of the things that I want us to recognize, there's really value in serving one another. There's true value in sharing and supporting one another. There's a real value in giving that support and service, and there's a value in receiving that support and service. And that brings forth a greater level of collaboration and cooperation and valuing those two things. And so if we need to relearn that, then we need someone who's practiced that. Right. If you go through rehab in a drug rehab or whatnot, they'll tell you the same mind that got you in here, you need somebody else to help show you how to now operate. And that's toward building the new culture.
So it really benefits you to have people that you can talk to, that you can emulate, who could be your mentor.
Right.
Yeah.
And so step 7 would be living that new life, manifesting that humanity. And so that's the 7 steps in a synopsis.
Wow. So could you just run them down quickly for us, all 7 steps in yeah.
Step 1, don't move, seek.
I love that. Don't move, seek understanding. That's so lean, actually. Go ahead.
Step 2 is acknowledging the harm of our culture. Step 3 is letting go of our power, privilege, and fears, because you letting go of and changing brings forth a lot of fears. Step 4 is appreciating the value of others. Step 5 is repairing and healing the harm. Step 6 is being led by a new mind. And step 7 is manifesting humanity.
Wow. I'm sure this takes time, right? This is a life's work. This is not.
We love our convenience, but you can't get this one on DoorDash.
It's not available on DoorDash. Hey, JT, tell us about your podcast and your book. You already told us about the book already, but tell us a little bit about your podcast.
So the podcast, I accidentally met a Black man on LinkedIn who spells his name exactly the same as another Black man that I know. And they both have a bald head, and it comes across my phone, and I see this small face, and he has an event that happened, and I send out a congratulatory text to him. And his name is Corey May, and it's spelled Kory. And that's the second time I've ever seen someone spell their name Corey in that manner, and May is his last name. So I shout out, hey, K May, and I haven't talked to this guy in a while. And and he reaches back, hey man, what's up with you? And I just moved to Florida for a job. And he said, and I told him I've moved to Florida, and he said, Florida. And then he said something that startled me. He said, I would really like to know more about what you do. And I thought, well, you already know about what I do. Like, we've been talking for ages. And then
it wasn't the same Corey.
I opened up his profile, and it said Iowa City, Iowa. And I went, he's not from East St. Louis, Illinois. This is a different Corey May. So we exchanged phone numbers. And that first night we talked in a short introduction, we both acknowledged that we would love to do a podcast, hadn't figured out what the right mode is or how we wanted to present it or whatnot. And we said, you know what? Hey, if you think of anything that we could do together, let's touch base. And I went to sleep that night thinking, well, I was raised around Black folks. If he's in Iowa, he has to have been raised around a bunch of white folks. Maybe I'll reach out to him and see, what if we just got to know each other on a podcast? We purposely do not ask each other about our history, our life. We've gotten to the point where we may talk about some current events now behind the scenes, but for the most part, we keep our conversations of getting to know each other on the podcast. And we've done 27 episodes in our first season of kind of getting to know each other. And we call it Same Difference.
Same Difference. What an amazing idea. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So does he have observations on white people that surprise you?
Yeah, not only surprised me, but just kind of like the level of not seeing his own representation where he's at, right? But he's a storyteller by trade, and so he does these storyteller competitions and he trains other storytellers. But one of his stories was being a small child looking for the Black G.I. Joe member, and his aunt had to take him to Gary, Indiana. I think it was where he ended up being, but somewhere near Chicago, just to be able to purchase this because there wasn't a market where he was from. So even seeing the representation, right? When we were growing up, Soul Train and American Bandstand were on our TV. He didn't get Soul Train, so he only got American Bandstand. He didn't get to see the Black representation of as much of as what we were access to. And so that was a big eye-opening thing for me. And even though we were both minorities amongst our group, there's still subtle differences in being in the power structure, having the power structure behind me and being the minority versus being the minority and not having the power structure, the other group having that power structure. So
the show is called Same Difference. Okay, got it. And tell us the name of your book again, JD.
Race for What? A
Race for What?
Journey and Guide to Healing Racism from Within.
All right, thank you. Hey, JD, we talked about this already, but can you sort of recapitulate? What is your one piece of advice for a young person starting out?
So read my book, The 7 Steps. No, I'm just kidding.
Buy the book. That's what he said. Yeah.
No, it's really to seek understanding, but also trying to seek the understanding of recognizing when you're positioning yourself versus just being the best version of yourself, right? And so sometimes we even get scared to give and be caring to others, right? And when we're not being seen because we're not getting credit for it, or because they may not reciprocate it. And if we're going to change the culture, sometimes we're going to have to do things, and it's going to take, practice of doing it and not being recognized, but still practicing those behaviors of being the best version of yourself, being the most caring version of yourself, being the most loving version, sharing when you see, and so that we can start to shift and see value in those things. We get caught up in positioning, and it's so subconsciously done. It's really breaking away from that. So
really just stepping away from the positioning and being the best version of yourself. Yeah. Wow, beautiful advice, JD.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you very much for joining me at the Edges of Lean. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I wish you well with everything you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on there, and I wish you the same. Keep up the great work.
This is Bella Engelbach, and I'd like to thank JD Mass for being my guest at the Edges of Lean. What did you learn from this conversation? What ideas did it spark? We would love to hear from you. Meet JD at raceforwhat.com and on LinkedIn. Check out the Same Difference podcast too. Please find me on LinkedIn or at leanforhumans.com or comment wherever you watch or listen. Don't forget to subscribe. Check out all my friends in the Lean Communicators community at leancommunicators.com, where you'll find lots of great new content every week. The Edges of Lean is written and produced by Bella Engelbach with support from Podcast Inc. This is a Lean for Humans production.